our reaction in these terrifying times is to withdraw, but we need each other. And we need to understand that even when we have vastly different opinions and views and perspectives and ideas, that doesn't mean that we're functioning as separate entities. And we have to find a way back to seeing our humanity.
We're all driven by the same values. It's just the external looks really, really, really different. But that spirit's the same.
Feelings are neither right nor wrong. They're only valid. And we have to get good at recognizing feelings so we can validate them and then be able to explore them and be curious about them.
Wherever we are on the political spectrum, the first and most important thing that we can do is register to vote. You will feel better if you align your actions with your beliefs and your vision.
You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissie Ott.
Hello, friends, and welcome to our first roundtable version of Solving for Joy. I am so pleased to welcome back our podcast guests, Sara Bovitz, Joaquin Lopez, and Corey Thompson today. We're trying something new. We are going to have a roundtable conversation with the intention of this conversation contributing and hopefully being of service to our listeners in navigating the turbulent time that is the final chapter of the United States election season in 2024. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, you are probably experiencing a fair amount of uncertainty. You are aware of the background of divisiveness, and perhaps you've noticed some deterioration in our collective systems of care and our collective experience of joy and connection. So it is my intention to bring this conversation today and ask our guests to speak from their various points of view, their intersectionalities, about how they see possibilities solving for joy during turbulent and divisive times like this. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm so excited to get started. And I'll invite Sara to begin answering, but all of you are welcome to address. There are many people in our country and beyond our country's borders who are grieving the loss of their own personal safety and security, the loss of their own human rights. I'm aware that just this morning I heard the Taliban has forbidden women to raise their voices or laugh in public. And while that's not at all in my sphere of control or influence, it is in my sphere of concern. I imagine that the questions of, loss of rights or loss of security or loss of whatever it is we hold dear is on the minds of many people. As we face this, I'm wondering how do you address staying grounded in the face of that level of uncertainty? And what do you think would help our listeners to hear today?
Well, Chrissie, that's such an important question and sort of idea to talk about on a broader level, because I think that our reaction in these terrifying times is to withdraw and go inside ourselves, because that's the only place that we really are safe. And to my mind, I think that produces the opposite effect of what we need, because we need each other in these times. But we need to see each other for more than the yard sign that we have. And we need to understand that even when we have vastly different opinions and views and perspectives and ideas, that doesn't mean that we're functioning as separate entities in this life and on this planet. And we have to find a way back to seeing our humanity with ourselves. If you don't mind, I'll tell a short story that sort of speaks to that community, which happened the last time we were in this circumstance. So in 2017 or 2018, when the there was the big migrant influx and the caravans coming up. I have 2 sons who are Guatemalan. One is LGBTQ. They're both brown. I'm a white woman. And that complicates our interactions with the world sometimes. One day we were in Baskin Robbins getting an ice cream treat after school. My boys were young. They were still in elementary school. And my oldest son had started a project in his school about they had to pick a social cause that they were inspired to contribute to. And he wanted to work with immigrant families. And I was asking about that. I said, that's great. Tell me more. How did you come to that? And he said, well, Mom, I'm Guatemalan. I said, yes, I'm aware. And he said, when I hear our president talking about my people as rapists and murderers, it hurts. And I figure, excuse me if I get a little emotional, he said, I figure if it hurts me that much, how much worse it must be for them. And it makes me want to help them. And I said, so we had a whole conversation about it, and we got our ice cream and we moved over and we sat down. And shortly afterward, a woman came over and said, I'm sorry, forgive me. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop on your conversation. She was also a white woman. We're in Portland. And she said, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop on your conversation, but I couldn't help but overhear. And I just have to tell you that is not how your community feels. I want you to know, as another American living in your community, we support you and we do not feel that way. And the wave of relief and appreciation that came over me was overwhelming.
Because I got chills just listening to it.
Right? It was so powerful. And the impact that had on my 2 brown children, to feel embraced by a random member of their community and supported in this really complicated time, was profound and had a lasting impact on them and their worldview. And I tell that story just because those moments that we have where we can see beyond division and find a connection on that human level with each other go well beyond those moments.
Yes. They do. They so surpass those things, even when we get the message that we're supposed to acknowledge this as some kind of barrier, not just a boundary, a barrier.
Yeah.
When you said people often retract, they go inside, I was inspired to think about how, it's very skillful to keep a safe place for ourselves inside. But it's not as skillful to retract all of our connection receptors, right? It's skillful to be able to do both, to stay with yourself in a grounded place on the inside and still have some capacity to reach out across differences and connect because of our inherent interdependence. Our interdependence is not predicated on our political views or identities. And this brings up a story for me. There was a time in 2019 when I was rescued with my 88-year-old mother who was on a walker and a 30-something nephew who was in a wheelchair with a spinal cord injury, and my 60-something-year-old brother who was on oxygen and on hospice for lung disease. The 3 of them and I and another individual were rescued in an inflatable boat at the front door because there was water up to our knees in the house in Texas. We were transferred to a pontoon boat, which was happily boating in the middle of the street in their neighborhood, and then to the back of a Army truck. So it was the transfer into the Army truck. So we had 3 very mobility impaired individuals for different reasons. And the folks who were out there in their waders pushing the wheelchair up the ramp for my nephew and, supporting my mom, basically carrying her up the ramp for my mom. I saw these individuals and I was like, I know that we are voting differently. It was September. So it was, it was election season. Things were very acute right then, right? And it brought me to tears, our interdependence and the love and care that these people brought to us. I was then rescued further by my amazing family members who I could not adore more, who also locate themselves basically 180 degrees from me on the political spectrum. And I respect their views, right? It does not cause less love. It may cause less understanding or some confusion, but doesn't cause less love.
That's a beautiful story, Chrissie. I think that speaks to all of it, right? And that it's easy to get distracted by taglines and obnoxious statements and, entrenched beliefs. But if we can find our way through that to actually see each other again, I think that's how we heal.
Yes. And so much heart in your son's response. That is the very heart of compassion, right? To identify, oh, my suffering is magnified in another, and I am inspired not only to acknowledge that that exists, but to take action in service of improving that condition. How
Right.
wonderful to have such a clear view of his innate compassionate heart.
Yeah. Well, the hearts of
Good job.
children, they're not hardened yet. They're not calloused yet.
Yes. May they stay so.
Yes.
That kind of reminds me to think and feel deeply into what's happening for people who are in marginalized communities, or they are marginalized due to their intersectionalities and identities. And I'll ask Joaquin if he would like to start, but I'm really welcoming conversations from all of us on this. What ways are most effective, in your opinion, to center our more marginalized voices, to let people know that our care is intact and we want to take action in service of compassion?
Hi, Chrissie. I wish I had a good answer. I don't know. I think about when I was young and I was coming to terms or coming to knowing that I was different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. That is such an unconscious experience that the kids on the playground don't know what is happening. I don't know what's happening. We just know there's difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you intervene that when we're so unconsciously wired to understand our kind and be aware of our differences in order to survive. I don't know. I really don't know.
I think I don't know is a really honest answer. And I wonder, is there anybody who, they could have just been an upstander, but they might have just been somebody who was like, I see your difference and I'm going to stay connected.
I think there's, from my own experience, who wants to be different? And regardless of how wonderful or how empowered you are for being different, you're still different. The fact that you're an other doesn't go away, regardless of the love that comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
So one other can't take that away from me. I have to come to terms with myself that I'm in this experience of otherness. And that's for me to come to terms with. The world has their own experience of that. The other world has their own experience of that. But I have to come to terms with that. And the terms that I've come to are that, yeah, I am different. And I don't know why. And so be it. What I do know is that everybody gets up in the morning, wipes their butt, brushes their teeth, makes something to eat, right? So they can pay their bills. I know that much, right?
Yes.
And I know that we all do the same things very differently. But I don't think there's actual difference in difference, right? Like, we're all doing the same thing. So what are we talking about? And can we just stop it?
Yeah, difference is cause for curiosity, right? And it's such a balancing act to acknowledge cause for curiosity without rejecting it, because our lower brain centers identify difference as threat, and that's an evolutionary, setting in the animal brain. Like, not my tribe, possible threat to life. And we have then used the transitive process or transitive property to apply that, I think, errantly to all kinds of differences. I like how you point to the universal. We all sleep, we all eat, we all get dressed, we all groom ourselves unless we are in a state of extreme suffering, difficulty, challenge, whatever. Like, we all have innate tendencies to do these things. Corey, as a therapist, we're lucky to have two therapists today, both Joaquin and Corey. And I'll ask you this question, Corey. How do you find people in intimate relationships, in families, in couples, etc., can do their best to stay connected, to solve for joy, and perhaps have different experiences of this external circumstance?
It's a great question. I think in a way, it's already been said. I think that the way Sara and Joaquin both said it, there's this beautiful little thread that's running through there about being aware of what we're in response to, of being open. I think that to go inward and yet still be accessible to the world around us is a very difficult thing to do, to navigate, to stay balanced. And I really loved what I heard, and what I took from both of your stories was this idea that there is a safety in community, there's the safety in sameness, there's this experience where safety is both good and it's limiting. And I think that also intersects with our desire to be our own person. And when I think about that intersection and how that plays out then in relationship with others, we start talking about infinite dynamics between people because we're in response to so many things at one time. So I really think that when we think about the intimacy that lives in our relationships, it is about being aware. It is about being able to go inside, to know where we are, to know what we're in response to know how that intersects with the world around us, but especially how does that intersect with the people we love the most? How does that impact our want for them, our desire to be with them? And if we don't have a way to say, your question to Joaquin was like, how do we stay grounded? That's hard because we're talking about a world that impacts our nervous system, that challenges us all the time. To be able to, it sounds really easy to just stop and take a deep breath and stretch your arms and be centered. Sounds like a lovely place to live. But it's a lot more complicated than that. So I think it starts with awareness, and then comes the room for curiosity. Curiosity about ourselves, what's resonating, what we're in response to, what's pushing against our values, what's happening for our partners and our family and the people we love. And then how can we engage that in a way that's purposeful and meaningful?
Yeah. How do we skillfully
That's tricky.
engage that, or how do we skillfully decide not to engage that because it's not a safe enough relational
Exactly.
space to engage without rupture?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a real factor. There's so much richness in all of that you just said. And I was snagged a little bit by, when we are in response to so many things and social media amplifies the amplitude, like the volume and the frequency. It is just like continuously poking the bear of our mind, of our unbridled parts of our brain, right? And underneath that is awareness, as you rightly pointed out, awareness of what we are up to, awareness of what we're feeling and thinking. And I'm thinking about feeling feelings, right? Like we often find a feeling as a stop sign when another truth is that if we make space for our feelings to exist without our actions always equaling our own feelings, right? We can feel our feelings without exerting them on unsuspecting victims in our family. It's a good thing. It's a really good thing. It's one of the fulcrums that I'm sure that you both work a great deal with in therapy, and that Sara and I are also frequently sharing about in the coaching dynamic, that when we increase our awareness to a slightly more metacognitive level, we can ask, what is going on right now in my body? My body's having a feeling. The feeling is rage. Feeling is fear. The feeling is, I feel uncertain about our connection right now, and that makes me want to retreat. The feelings can be so many things, and they can be in response to this overlaid dynamic of our country is split, the stakes feel high, and people get extraordinarily rigid and certain of their views, and that certainty and rigidity is happily fanned. Those flames are fanned by our media, our polarized media, for the most part.
It makes me think about this idea of feelings is so important, because I feel that feelings are neither right nor wrong. They're only valid, right? But then we live in a world that tries to help us make sense of those feelings. But to your point, sometimes a feeling is just a feeling. And we have to get good at recognizing feelings so we can validate them and then be able to explore them and be curious about them.
Right. Feelings are weather systems. We might prefer not to have the rain all the time, right? We might prefer a different weather system, but it's just a weather system. It happened because of reasons. Like our feelings happened because of thoughts and beliefs and experiences, antecedents, as you or as Joaquin acknowledged in his recent podcast, right? These weather systems make sense because of antecedent happenings. It doesn't have to dictate our behavior. We can get out the umbrella, or we can decide not to.
Corey, what comes to my mind in hearing you reflect on these issues is the idea of curiosity. And I think that is something that we have lost, because it's a vulnerable place to be, right? If I'm really going to express and explore and engage in a place of true curiosity about who you are underneath the flags and the signs and the talk, right? That's a very vulnerable moment. And I think that's also precious and valuable. And if we can find our way back to actually being curious about each other, I think that's a step on the path, perhaps.
I love that, Sara. Thank you. So let's talk about social media. Let's talk about doom scrolling for a minute. Who here is guilty of finding themselves stationary with their phone in their hand for an unusual amount of time Scrolling. Oh, we're looking around. We're looking very innocent. No, it's just me, I guess. Okay.
No, Chrissy, I want to say that I turn my phone off at 7 p.m. and I don't turn it on again until 10 a.m. And I only check it about 3 or 4 times a day.
Are you serious?
Just kidding.
Oh my God. I was speechless in awe. Oh my gosh, that is aspirational for sure. I think I know that scrolling makes this worse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we know that the more we are attuned to the small flat screen in our hands, the more of a hot mess our brain becomes, like a little bit overstimulated and scrambled, and not really a great place for solving for and connecting to our inner experience of joy, which I love defining as meaning, alignment, and delight. I do think it's a great dopamine hit, right? Like, we're getting micro dopamine hits, but it's actually making us kind of immune or numb to life's real dopamine hits, like the gorgeous sunset or a hug.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to plan ahead. I want to plan ahead for an alternative activity when I catch myself, when I have enough wherewithal metacognitively to say, oh, I just fell down the rabbit hole. What am I going to do instead? Give me ideas, guys. What do you think?
I can share with you, Chrissy, what I do. And when I find myself in it, I will just simply just throw the phone aside. Like, I'll throw it. I'll just have to like get it out of my, because it's not about making, at that point, it's not about like responding to it. No, it's like I have to react away from it because it's caught me. So I just kind of throw it. I just kind of throw it to the side, and then I shake my head and I get myself out of that trance because it puts you in a trance, you know? So I get myself out of that trance, and then I go to something else that's like um, actual, that's not a screen, like a book maybe. And that's what kind of snaps me out of it.
It's such a good word. It is a trance.
I love that. I think you pointed out a really important thing, Chrissy, which is like it makes it worse, and yet we can't we can't not look away, right? Um, but I think it is that awareness. I think for me, I like, although it doesn't really come to fruition this way, but like in my head, I like that idea of like that 10-minute rule of like, if I'm lost in the doom scroll and I'm suddenly like aware, like what just happened with the last 20 minutes, right? It's just about do something else, do anything, go do anything for at least 10 minutes because you'll turn your ship into a different direction, right? Even if it's not really a commitment to full 10 minutes, but to get up, to step outside. Those are things I do, to go let my dogs out, to even, I try to stay away from screens, but like even like check a work email or do something like that to get my brain to remember that there's a whole world happening around me, and we probably want to take a minute and not get too lost in the joy because we have a need to know. That's why we go to social media.
Yeah, we have an itch to scratch.
Yes, we get misaligned, I think, all the time.
I am not one to speak to how to get off of social media because I've never been a big utilizer. I'm an OG Gen Xer. And I kind of missed that curve. But I do know that I am a news junkie. And so I constantly have like NPR on, or I'm reading the New York Times or the Washington Post or the New Yorker, or, all the things within my bubble and my own echo chamber, because I acknowledge that I live in an echo chamber. But I also know that in order to stay grounded, I need quiet time with myself, and my mind needs a little bit of peace and the absence of all of this constant influx of external stimulus to settle and find itself. And so every morning when I get up, the first thing I do is take my dog out for a walk. And historically, what I've done during that time is pop in my AirPods and listen to the news. And I thought to myself, what if I just was quiet during that time? And so I started leaving the AirPods at home. And what that has given me is 30 minutes a day when I'm moving my body. I have nothing in my ears, nothing in front of my face. I'm just walking and observing. And that is my own sort of, in air quotes, mindfulness practice, because it gives the brain a chance to settle and really filter through the thoughts that, it's its job to make thoughts. And so that's just doing its job. But to be able to let them settle so that you can reflect on them and go forward from a perspective of responding to that stimulus as opposed to reacting to it, I think matters.
Yes, Sarah, it is so useful to take a step outside of our own echo chambers from time to time. I really like going on a media fast, just having a few days at a time where I am intentional about not ingesting media, or having a thought before I turn on the media. Where is this coming from? What is the point of view that's being iterated? And how could this impact my nervous system? I love the bottom up approach. So the top down, like brain to body, is one way, like we decide to do something different, but the body to brain connection may actually be more effective, where we actually shake, like jump up and down, do a little dance. Literally you break the trance with your body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is super helpful. I also want to bring up how our tendency is to live only in the echo chamber of our own existing beliefs when we're in social media, right? So we have constant exposure to similar content, and the algorithm knows our preferences and therefore advantages those preferences to keep us scrolling, because that makes advertisers advertise, right? And the other effects are polarization, isolation, decreased exposure to a diversity of perspectives, which, if we're not keeping a very close conscious eye on it, can impact our ability to empathize with people across difference, right? Like we mentioned earlier, our ability to connect across difference can literally decrease. And then outsized frustration, outsized hostility, outsized social harm between people with this difference. And we get into, like, I would never treat somebody this way. I would never expect that person to treat another person this way in real life, IRL, right? But somehow in the echo chambers or across these, conversations in Reddit or Discord or like name your space, things get barbed.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that, Chrissy. Monica Lewinsky has a documentary called 15 Minutes of Shame. And in this documentary, she invites these scientists to talk about a research. And I'm going to paraphrase the research, and I recommend everybody go watch that documentary. But basically that they took these fans, soccer fans, football fans. Well, for us, it's soccer. And they tied these electrodes to their brains. And they saw that whenever their team scored, they got these dopamine hits. Like, they felt really good, right? And then when the opposing team missed a score, they experienced more dopamine, more togetherness, more bond. So we actually bond with our kind when an other is falling apart or being destroyed or hurting.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah. So that's in us, which is so weird. And advertisers run with that, right? Because advertising is a scarcity mentality. You need this because your life isn't enough, right? So it's just like fire. And I don't know how to put that out.
I mean, keeping our eye on it is the first step, right? Keeping our eye on it, noticing that when we fall down the scrolling hole into our filter bubble where we're trapped and our worldview is externally shaped by what we're shown by the algorithm, right? Like just trying to keep our eye on it, even having conversations like this, even just talking about it brings it more into our consciousness, and then we can break the trance more readily, more quickly, hopefully more frequently.
But I think this trance is the thing, because when we experience hurt, really deep hurt, and we're not really present, it does put us in a trance. And anytime we don't want to be here, we go into a trance. We kind of, it's like this dance. And oftentimes that trance allows us to get through things, right? And sometimes there's like different levels of trance. And I know myself, I just recently realized I was in this trance where I thought I was broken for all my life, and it just like lifted. So like now I'm like, wow, what was I doing? Dancing this trance of brokenness.
Now I'm thinking about trance music and raves from the 90s. Yes. So let's say that person A has been tranced by a filter bubble and echo chamber on the far left, and person B has been entranced by filter bubbles and rabid media on the far right. And let's say they care about each other and they don't want to risk rupture in their relationship. How do you see a healthy way forward for them?
An idealist way, a viewpoint.
Sure, we can start with idealism.
Why not?
Why not?
Let's shoot for the stars. I think there was something that stands out in what you were both just saying too, about the purpose in scrolling, but the affirming that happens, right? And that process, we feel it's what we started with today. It's like to feel part of the same, to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel like we are all a part of the same purpose, even if it's in our small world or our small side, right? I think there's something in that, but I also think about the way the social media, it trains our brain. So then when in a world where we don't have as many boundaries, on social media, we can say whatever, we can think whatever, we can feel whatever, but in relationship with somebody else, we, in theory, should not do that. But yet we train ourselves with so much content coming into our world all the time, right? So then in real relationship, we feel that same feeling. I get to have my say, I get to have my view, I get to have my opinion, I get to call you out, I get to lean towards that, the words you threw out there were hostility, the harmful, the validating perspective of my own voice. But that doesn't work in connection with each other.
Doesn't work IRL, right? It's like we're operating an avatar in a video game that looks like real life.
Absolutely.
And then we start to become potentially even more comfortable with the avatar existence than the three-dimensional existence. And what do you think contributes to more actual joy?
There's a trick to this that I do not have the answer to.
Tell us the hat trick.
The hat trick is this idea of, on paper, I think we all know the answer to that. The good thing will bring more joy.
But joy is complicated, as we know, right? It brings more joy, and joy is complicated.
Exactly. Joy is very complicated, and joy is in the process, right? Is how I view it. So to really trust that joy is there in the good things, I have to trust that that's what I want to move towards. But can we really, probably more on a subconscious level, can we really trust that's out there without reaching it first? Probably not. That's why we lean the other way. We have to be willing to lean towards the uncertainty, the unknown, the unpredictability, the scariness, the big feelings, because then we will have joy. We will answer that question and be like, that felt much better. I like this much better. But until we really experience that, I don't know how well we trust that just as human beings. I think we have to affirm it. We have to reinforce it. So there's a hat trick there of like, how do I allow myself to always push myself in that direction and experience that joy to then affirm when I am triggered or pulled the other direction that the balance is misaligned. And I actually have agency and choice about which way I want to go.
Yeah.
That's really hard. I don't have the answer. Go do this and you'll be fine. Nobody has the answer. But we have to be aware. And like we started with today, we have to turn inward to turn outward. But we also have to share in that connection and the impact we have on each other. It matters. It's an intersection of our values and who we are as people. If Uncle Bob over there is completely polar opposite as me, how do I hold a boundary, but I also hold love and care? That's a lot to hold.
There's some scripting that we're not prepared with all the time to actually say that language is painful to me. Could we talk about what's present with here right now? Joaquin.
I agree with a lot of what Corey is saying. And when it comes to navigating conversations with folks who have a different point of view, I first know that they're not going to care for me. So they're not going to be watching out for my feelings. So
Wait,
that's okay.
Do you know that? Do you know that they don't care for you?
I don't think they want me to hurt, but they're not going to come in and make sure that I'm having a good experience, right? Or that my voice is being heard. That's not, and you know what, quite frankly, that's nobody's job but your own. Just voice your own. So I kind of go in with it with that attitude. And I also go in and I say, okay, they really feel right. And I do think that there's something about the experience of being right, feeling right, thinking logically that you're right, that offers a sense of control and ease and sense of that you're doing something right in life because you don't feel you're doing anything right in life sometimes. And I do think it, honest to God, it comes from that kind of space that they just want to win. They just want to get something right. And God damn it, they want to express themselves. So I really feel when I'm with somebody that's got a different point of view from me, they're doing it from the same place I'm doing it from, right? They're doing it from a place of survival. They're doing it from a place of wanting to keep what's theirs and wanting to connect with folks like themselves, it's the same thing. It's almost like a mirror. And it's strange to me because it's so different, right? But I sit there and I ask them, well, tell me why this or X or Y. And they'll say, well, they'll have really good arguments. Then I'm like, I hadn't thought about that. Right? I don't agree with it, but I get it. I totally. And when you go down to it, they're driven by the same values. We're all driven by the same values. It's just the external looks really, really, really different. Really different. But that spirit's the same. And that's a real hard one. There is something to be said about being flexible. I'm of the spirit of you really can't control outcomes. You can impact probability, but you can't control outcomes, right? Some people think they can, right? And so the work becomes about control instead of impacting. So that I do think there's a difference there.
I love that. You both spoke so eloquently to the complexity inherent in this question we're addressing today. And we talked about agency and you just spoke about control. And the other side of that continuum is helplessness, which I think many of us fear, right? And agency and action is a big part of many of us feeling better, feeling like we're moving toward a better state. So wherever we are on the political spectrum, the first and most important thing that we can do from my perspective is register to vote and follow through with voting. Make sure that you are actually doing the bare minimum to participate in this dynamic process. If you are compelled to do more than just vote, by all means, contribute to the candidates that you feel strongly in support of. If you feel that your time and action might be contributory to what you want to see happen in the world, looking back on it, you will feel better if you align your actions with your beliefs and your vision, right? When we have a vision and then we're aware that we have a vision for ourselves, so we have a vision of exactly how and when we're going to vote. We have a vision for the outcome we wish to see. We might participate in a phone bank or a door knock or a postcard writing event. And, at the very least, we can check in with each other and say, are you okay? Or if we know somebody's across the aisle from us, hey, however this goes, I just want you to know I'm here and I want to stay connected. And I'm not going to Pollyanna that and pretend like it's simple or straightforward, because there are legitimate threats to that capacity. So no should is inferred here. It's really just sort of aspirational about how we stay in as much peace in our bodies as we possibly can through this process. And I think asking, what is it like for you? Just like you were describing, Joaquin, when you ask somebody who's really rigid, we'll say, who's very different, or even somebody who's similar perspective but different amplitude from you, right? Like, what is it like for you? Is an interesting question to get into spaces where we might have a common human experience.
Yeah, I have friends who work in politics, and I had a boss once, and they used to do a lot of campaigning. And we were talking, and she said that when it comes to campaigns, there are people on either side of the spectrum, and they're going to vote their party line. Doesn't matter who is running; they're going to vote their party line. Like that's their vote, and you can't really change their minds regardless of who is running. And so the folks that the people are campaigning for are the people who are in the middle that are don't know which way to lean, right? And when she said that to me, I was like, that makes sense. That's why it's so dramatic, because they're trying to get people who are in the middle to go either way. They're not worried about the people who are on either side of the spectrum who are voting their party, right? It's really the people in the middle they're trying to like push to some other side. And when she said that, everything kind of made sense to me, and everything was like, wow, now I get why it's so divisive and dramatic.
Yeah. So as we close our conversation today, I'll ask each of you, what thoughts do you have about navigating this complicated time? What are some takeaways that you would like to offer?
That's a great perspective to kind of land on. I think when I think about this whole conversation today, I come back to kind of where I started, which is, how do we know what we're in response to? How do we know what we know? How do we honor the feelings and the perspectives and the world that we're navigating all the time? So I think my takeaway from all of this, even just for myself today, is it's a reminder to be able to give ourselves a little bit of permission to be curious about ourselves. The thing that stands out the most today is I think Joaquin just did a beautiful job of like pointing at the thing, which is like, we want to feel like we're in control. But I would bet you that if you took a minute and you wrote down everything that you feel like you're in response to now, a lot of those things would not be in your control. And so can we give ourselves a little room to be curious about where we're at, see what we actually have control over in our world, not everybody else's world, and be able to lean towards that, to trust, to take the risk, because maybe in that we're going to solve our own sense of joy. Maybe we'll find some place to be grounded and centered and not get lost in all of the other things, to know where we are, to know how we feel, to know what we think, because we're coming up on an election. We're coming up on, the world's always in some sort of flux, we'll say, but we need to know why we do the things we do, why we vote the way we vote, why we say the things we say. Where does that really come from?
Yes, how much of that is a product of our environment and culture,
exactly,
and staying connected
because that's
to people.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's part of our world, but we share in the ownership of that we also have to hold ourselves accountable and be able to, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day. And we have to feel good about that person that we see. So we need to be curious about where our thoughts, where our beliefs, where our values all stem from, so we can honor them in our process as we move through the world.
Yeah. Thank you. So useful. Joaquin, final thoughts, takeaways.
Yeah, I think that my final thoughts are maybe a little bit stoic, in that there is no such thing as control. There's only what you think you're doing. So, people do that. People like to put themselves in some sort of trance-like state that feels like they're in control. And I think that that's okay. That's what we do. That's what we do when we're traumatized. That's what we do when we find a really good way of doing something. That's what we do, And I used to think when I would find, when I was a kid, I would find like a really great deal on jeans at Nordstrom's. I would want everybody to buy these jeans because it's such a great deal. And not everybody wants jeans. And so I had to learn that. And also, we don't know what attachments people are acting out. Some people are acting out that for their love and safety, they must be aggressive. And some people are acting out for their love and safety, they must be soft and open.
Mm-hmm.
And those are both true.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard, right? But what I would offer the public is, are you responding or are you reacting? Kind of like what Corey was saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking or are you just feeling, right? And what happens if we maybe just respond a little, right? With some more thought, right? Or maybe what happens if we just react more honestly, right? Where that will lead us. And then one thing I'm always astounded by, whenever I meet folks who are leaders, especially leaders of like the more religious aspects or the more spiritual aspects, and they're real rigid, right? That's always such a it's so confusing. But I say, if you really have some grand idea that's supposed to bring us all together, then it should bring us all together. And if it puts us and pins us against each other, it's not a grand idea that brings us together.
Yes.
And if that comes your way, put on your sneakers and run. And don't stop.
I love it. And Sara, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I certainly echo what you've all touched on, these really important themes of curiosity and connection and control or lack thereof. And I really feel the importance of recognizing in this time the difference between the mindset of, well, I can't control what happens, with the mindset of, I can't actually control what happens. I can, however, control my experience of it and what I choose to do with it.
Yes, Sarah, it's so crucial that we recognize what is in our sphere of control and what we can actually take ownership of. It's a crucial step navigating such complex times.
Right. And I think that that sense of empowerment is especially important right now in this time that feels so existential to so many of us, particularly when we're viewing it from our individual echo chambers, magnified by social media and all the ways that were addressed earlier. And I think it invites us to take a moment to really get clear on what our foundational values are. Like, what are those really fundamental principles and values and dreams and goals as human beings that we have and that are the impetus for what we go forth and create in the world? And I think, as Joaquin spoke to, and as Chrissie exemplified beautifully with the story of her family being rescued from the flood, I think if we look closely enough, we'll find how similar we all are, that the details and the noise are so busy and so in our face, they distract us from those foundational values that matter. And I think we get through that by sharing stories. And that means both telling your stories and receiving them with an open mind and an open heart. And that does not mean that you're going to love everyone in the world. And it does not mean that 300 million people are all of a sudden going to come together and agree on the most important issues of our day and how to solve them. But I think what that does is create a flow of empathy, and that can only serve to deepen our understanding of those issues and what the root causes are of all of the distress that we're feeling across so many areas in this day and age. And that act makes room for us to find some creative solutions to these problems. Because again, it's not about everyone coming to the same conclusion. It's about navigating a path forward for all of us. And practically speaking, I think for myself, that starts with catching myself when I start to spiral out into these stories in my head about strangers. I mean, I'll be honest, a MAGA hat, I have a visceral reaction when I see that. And that's because I have a whole story in my head about who's wearing it. And this really came clear for me one day when I was driving down the highway and a big white 4x4 pickup truck with a very loud engine came roaring past me and cut me off. And I noticed a Trump sticker on the back of it. And then I noticed another offensive bumper sticker that I won't even describe. And I had that visceral reaction driving down the highway, and I felt my face got flushed. I felt this wave of rage. And in my mind, I created an entire story for this person about the rifle they had underneath the front seat of their truck and where they lived and where they worked and what their life looked like. I literally had an entire character in my mind of this person. And all of a sudden I thought, Sarah, you haven't even seen the person. Like, I couldn't even see their face. It was just through the little back window of the truck. I hadn't even noticed their characteristics. And I think what happens in that moment is we have a choice. We can stay in that spun out place and continue to live and feed that Schadenfreude and that feeling of anger that really does give some dopamine hits, unfortunately. Or we can stop and ask ourselves, what else might be true? I thought in that moment of that person, gosh, what if that person is rushing to the hospital to see their sick child? Or what if that person is trying to get to work and they're freaked out because something happened that made them late and they're going to lose their job and not be able to support their family if they don't get there on time? Or, particularly poignant in my case, what if their spouse just died? That to me is enough to give me a pause and a moment. And I won't pretend that I had all kinds of lovey feelings towards this asshole that just cut me off in traffic. But it did shift from a generalized trope to imagining all of the parts of humanity that also exist within that 4x4 pickup truck. And I think that that is so meaningful to me because at the end of the day, it's when we dehumanize each other that we get lost.
Sarah, thanks for sharing that story. I really appreciate how transparent it is of you to share that reaction. And, anyone listening might have a similar reaction to different symbols that create, automatic thoughts and division and sort of dehumanizing or bad othering these people that we don't even know, right? When I see someone with a symbol that I have a reflexive aversion to, I try to just ground myself and think what else might be true. What else could be going on here? So important what you offered about what else does the context possibly include. Finds us some common ground.
Yes. You also talked about the mind-body connection and how fundamental it is to our well-being and how much we know about the impact of the body on the mind and the mind on the body, and that we really are one unit. And I always think of Brene Brown, who said, we go around assuming that we're thinking beings that have feelings, but in reality, we're feeling beings who think. And I come back to that over and over because it's profoundly true. I just want to say, speaking to solving for joy, I remain deeply hopeful for our progress as a species and as a society. I think we are each individually capable, competent human beings. And I do believe that we will find our way back to each other. I think that hope is joyful, and I think that joy is hopeful.
That is so true, Sarah. There's definitely hope and joy, and there is definitely joy in hope. Thank you for bringing that forward, as our entire aspiration here is to bring people closer to skillfully solving for joy in their own lives, and in particular in this complex, divisive political season. What a delightful conversation. I feel inspired and heartened, and I have a lot to chew on myself, thinking about why I believe and respond to circumstances in the way that I do, and continuing to lean into curiosity when I encounter loved ones or strangers who see the world different to my perspective, and to get really curious and remember that it really makes sense in their perspective. It's not, it doesn't not make sense from their perspective. And that is a point of respect to remember that, right? Like they are not, no one is an idiot because they believe differently, right? Or they feel differently, or they think differently. It does not equal idiocy, even if the position is very upsetting to us. So I just am so grateful to all three of you for this conversation. And, in our talking about the trance of scrolling and social media, I will just throw out there as a potential interest, no affiliate agreement here. getbrick.app is an app that basically tries to make your phone less enticing to your dopamine system. So investigate as you wish. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate and adore all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chrissie. It's really been wonderful. And Joaquin and Corey, so lovely to have this conversation with you as well.
Thank you so much for the time, Chrissie and Sara and Corey. I really enjoy these perspectives, and they're really challenging and difficult. But if we can't put our arms around them, we'll never really know how to embrace them, will we?
So true.
It's a wonderful opportunity to really come together in community and to be able to also not just connect, because ultimately that's what we're all looking for, but to have a moment like this to be able to also feel like maybe in a world that's a little bit crazy, we're also going to be okay. It's been a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Thank you guys so much. Here's my arms around all of you. Group hug. We'll see you next time. Thank you guys so much for listening to Solving for Joy. Join us next time for an episode of Solving for Joy with Dr. Tracy Asamoah about finding wholeness and joy in leadership. Also, it's not too late to join 30 Days of Creative Wisdom. If you haven't considered it, please come, even if we've already started. They're not sequential, they're meant to be drop-in, and you'll have replay access to all 30 episodes. So come and join us. If you are interested in knowing how to work with JoyPoint Solutions or any of the coaches, please go to joypointsolutions.com for more information, and know that we have both live and asynchronous versions of our signature course 12x12 to go. That's joypointsolutions.com. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my incredible team. Our music today is by Dennis Kishcook, cover photography by the talented Shelby Bracken. This podcast is produced by the amazing Kelsey Vaughn. Post-production and more are handled by Alyssa Wilkes and my executive assistant, Rachel Osborne. A special shout out to my steadfast friend and director of operations, Denise Crane, and to the one and only loyal champion #1 fan, Suzanne Sanchez. Thanks again for tuning in. May we continue caring for ourselves and others, and may we continue solving for joy.